Ibn Battuta, the most noted explorer of the medieval world, narrated a series of first-hand, comprehensive and historically precious observations on lands to which he traveled over almost 30 years in the 14th century. This Moroccan traveler passed through countless communities, cities and lands, and his observations, experiences and encounters have much to tell about the world and its workings in medieval times. Guided and inspired by Ibn Battuta's footsteps, this podcast opens a portal into the world of the East for people who are curious about the past, hungry for the marvels of traveling, and contemplate the wonders of cities. Accompany us over our journeys into the distant, unfamiliar, and unknown. Welcome to another episode of Oriental Journeys podcast. My name is Ray Behboudi and I'm your host as we take this journey of wonders together. Kohl is a generic term for a cosmetic eyeliner made using naturally sourced materials, a pulverized powder which darkens the edges of the eyelids. A cosmetic with a long and captivating history, Kohl has been widely used by men, women, and children throughout the ages across swathes of Africa and Asia, altering the appearance for a range of purposes and effects. During his travels toward Mecca, Ibn Battuta stayed in a convent outside Cairo, which claimed to preserve precious belongings of Prophet Muhammad, including the pencil he used to apply kohl to his eyes. One prophetic tradition of wearing kohl believed its use to hold multiple benefits, from the spiritual to the medicinal, and has crossed through centuries and been adopted across diverse Muslim communities. In this episode, we will trace the history of kohl to its known origin and will unveil the depths and multi-dimensionality of this near-universal makeup tool and the distinctive fine line it creates throughout history with our special guest, Zahra Hankir. In her latest book, Eyeliner, A Cultural History, Lebanese-British journalist Zahra Hankir explores the intersections of history, culture, and society, particularly in Western Asia, over the ubiquitous cosmetic, eyeliner. Zahra traces the history of the naturally sourced eyeliner commonly known as kohl over millennia. She traverses space, time, and cultures to delve into deeply human importance of a makeup tool which symbolizes power, religiosity, and commitment to moral codes. Her entertaining accounts reveal the complex significance of a seemingly simple adornment and tell us why there is more to eyeliner than meet the eyes. Hello, Zahra, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Ray. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
Before diving into our topic today, during our introductory emails, you told me that your father calls you Ibn Battuta. Why is that, and how do you and your father come to know about Ibn Battuta?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been sort of an avid traveler for many years now. I think really since I started being able to afford traveling, I would always make sure that I would go to a new place or two every year. And my father would sometimes say, like, where are you now, Ibn Battuta? Just as an affectionate way of referring to the fact that I would love traveling around different parts of, everywhere really, Europe, Asia, Africa, North America. And South America is very high on the list. That's one place I haven't been yet. I mean, in the Arab world, Ibn Battuta is known by everybody, really. It's like someone like Ghazali or Ibn Khaldun, Omar Khayyam, Rumi. He's just one of those names that everybody knows about, and he's often referred to in the context of travel. So I don't even remember when I first learned of Ibn Battuta. It's just someone that I sort of always knew about when I was growing up, and probably someone my father referenced, and that's probably my first sort of knowledge of him came from my father.
It sounds amazing. So, traveling and a passion for it is what you have in common with Ibn Battuta. I should also say congratulations on your new book. It must be very exciting. Can you tell us a bit on what is it about?
Sure. So, as the title says, it's really a cultural history of eyeliner. But my intention with the book was to really give a global perspective on the origins and history of eyeliner. And I wanted to focus in particular on the global south. So, I traveled to multiple countries, among them were Jordan, Chad, India, Japan, I also wanted to write about the Mexican American community, so I went to Los Angeles to write about that. I wanted to visit Nefertiti's bust, and instead of being in Cairo or in Egypt where she should be, she happens to be in Berlin. So I went to Berlin to visit her bust. And that was, yeah, that was the focus of the book, was to really spotlight communities of color. And to do that, I had to really travel to those countries. I could have traveled to multiple other countries in the global south, but obviously I didn't have the time or the budget to do that, but those were the places that I ended up focusing on in the book.
In your book, you make an interesting statement, which I would like to start our talk with. You said, "Today, Kohl is a celebration of my identity. As a journalist with Lebanese and Egyptian heritage, can you tell us what is it about Kohl that defines or connects you to your cultural history and cultural heritage?"
Yeah, Kohl is very personal for me because, as I said, I do have an Egyptian heritage, Lebanese heritage. Kohl is widely used across Western Asia, the Arab world, the Middle East, however you'd like to refer to that region, and Africa. And I grew up watching my mother applying Kohl in the morning when we lived in the West, when we lived in the UK. And as I'm sure you know, Kohl or eyeliner, when it's made from natural materials, has sort of powdery consistency that is often stored in very ornate pots, like very distinctive pots. So it doesn't look like the eyeliner that you might get from a drugstore in the Western world. So when I would see those kinds of pots, I would feel this immediate understanding that Kohl was just something very special, a very special substance. And I came to understand that it linked me to my Arab heritage because it plays such a central role in Arab culture and in Western Asian culture and North African culture. So that to me was something that I learned and gleaned as a very young child when I was maybe 11 or 12, and then came to learn more and more as I became a teenager. And then when we moved from the UK back home to Lebanon, I started to learn and see it much more. There is this idea of an Arab woman or Middle Eastern woman being very beautiful because of this idea of her having darkened eyes. And that idea has been sort of written about in literature, it's been written about in philosophical texts, ancient texts, been portrayed on the screen, in poetry, all that kind of thing. And that's not unique to Arab culture. It can be found in many other cultures as well, like Indian, South Asian culture, Iranian culture, Persian culture. So it really has this sort of global breadth to it, but it's very, very unique at the same time to each culture and even each person in each community. So I found that sort of pull and interest in eyeliner in my very early years, and especially to ancient Egypt, which we can talk about because that's really where it originated.
We definitely explore with you the charming history of eyeliner in Egypt later in our talk. For now, can you tell us how do you feel wearing eyeliner all the time? Eyeliner, particularly Kohl, is not considered a subtle makeup at all. It makes a statement.
Yes, it makes a very serious aesthetic statement. A makeup artist, Sharon Dosset, who I actually quote in my book, said it's serious business because it's a line that's just right across your eye. It's impossible not to see it if you meet someone who's wearing it. For me, I really want to say while it makes that aesthetic statement, I think it makes more of a statement because eyeliner is very unique in that it sits at sort of the intersection of many different areas. It's the intersection of beauty and aesthetics, also sort of culture and heritage and ancestry, also medicinally, it plays a role. Practically, it plays a role. It also plays a religious role in many communities and a spiritual role, starting as far back as ancient Egypt. It sits at the intersection of so many different things, also gender and sexuality as well. For me, when I think of eyeliner, when it comes to mind, and it makes a statement in more than one area. So not just the aesthetic area, but all those other areas that I mentioned as well. It conveys so many different messages. It really depends on the person and the message that they're wanting to convey. A lot of people wear eyeliner without thinking about those things, and that's what I hope the book is going to change. I hope that people realize that when they are wearing eyeliner, it carries much more than just aesthetics. It carries history, the weight of history, of global history, especially the history of the global south.
Let us delve more deeply into our exploration. What is Kohl and how different is it from the typical eyeliners in the market?
It's very different. I mean, I would say that the distinction is that coal is usually made from natural materials, naturally occurring materials, whereas eyeliner, especially as we know it in the West, is highly processed. So it's made from very processed materials. So with coal, it could be made from anything from like the sap of a tree or nuts, or in Asia, Southwestern Asia, it could be made from sandalwood. It could be made from crushed bones. It could be made from crushed stones. It could be made from minerals. The distinction is that it is natural materials that are used. Now, in ancient Egypt, malachite was used, and so was galena. So these were also natural materials, or lead sulfide. So again, these are things that are naturally occurring, and that would be the main distinction between the two. And as you said yourself, the meaning of the word coal is that it's like a pulverized powder. It's also a material that is created from a distilling process, which is where the word alcohol actually ironically comes from. The English word alcohol is derived from the Arabic word coal. So I think really the idea is that it is a naturally produced substance that darkens the and outlines the eyes, that is used for multiple purposes that go beyond beauty.
Given this definitive information on coal, how widely is coal used in Africa and Asia, and what other popular names are used for this cosmetic elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, it's used so widely that I would say it's actually ubiquitous. So I would say, I mean, it's impossible to put kind of an actual percentage or statistic on it, but it is used by men, women, and children. It is used or applied to their eyes or onto their foreheads to protect them against the evil spirit. It is used amongst Bedouin or rural communities to protect against the glare of the sun. It is used also in cities to beautify oneself. So it is ubiquitous. I say once you start seeing eyeliner, you can't unsee it. You will see it pretty much everywhere, even when it's worn in a subtle way. You still can really see it. And that's because kohl or kajal or sorme or mabari, there are so many different words, tiro, it's used in a way that is so central to those specific cultures and those regions of the global south. So to me, it's just like an additional part of one's culture, and it's very widely used by people across genders and also generations as well.
After this insightful brief, let's go to the historic roots of coal. Some of the earliest instances of coal wearing were found in ancient Egypt, including the glorious death mask of Queen Nefertiti. And you have said that the image of this has haunted you for years since you first saw it. Who was Queen Nefertiti, and what does her mask, with its heavily adorned eyes, tell us about the history and origin of eyeliner?
Well, ancient Egypt was a civilization that was really obsessed with its looks. That's how I phrase it in my book. They really prize the way that they look. And this is not for superficial reasons. It is really because one's physical appearance was closely tied to the idea of rebirth. So to procreate, you had to look a particular way and present in a particular way. And to do this, you had to use certain tools or materials. And one of those tools was eyeliner. Eyeliner, or kohl as it was referred to then, was actually so prized in ancient Egyptian communities that it was buried in tombs as well, in very ornate pots. So you can see how central it was. Again, it also played a practical role. So it would ward off the evil eye, but it would also protect against the glare of the sun, as I said, and also treat the eyes medicinally. So we know for sure that it played a significant role in ancient Egyptian society. It was worn by people of all classes. So those who are of upper or higher classes tended to wear kohl that was made of more sophisticated materials. It was also produced by essentially burning anything. All the materials that I mentioned to you earlier would be burned, and then soot would be produced from the burning or the ashes of those materials. And the soot would be what would comprise the pigments. The pigment would then be applied onto the eyes after being moistened with something like saliva or an oil or rose water, and then an applicator would be dipped into that concoction and then dragged along the eyes. Now, of all the ancient Egyptians, I argue that Nefertiti really reigned supreme when it came to her aesthetic and also how regal she was, and the fact that eyeliner lent her this very regal look. Eyeliner could be associated with power in terms of how it was produced, and she was very powerful, and it helped her, I think, channel this very regal look. Nefertiti reigned alongside her husband Akhenaten, and they were basically a power couple who really revolutionized ancient Egypt in their devotion to Aten, who was the sun god. So she didn't just play a sort of a decorative or symbolic role alongside her husband. She played, as we know, we don't know much about her, but we know that she played a substantial role in ruling over the civilization at the time. So she has this, I think, very fascinating aura about her. And some of this is tied to our conception of how she looked. But our interpretation of Nefertiti and her beauty is derived from her bust. And as we see on her bust, and as actually I think a lot of people are familiar with her bust, one of those pieces of art that has been replicated countless times over the course of a century, we know that she looked quite androgynous in the way that she was made up. Her face was quite symmetrical. We actually don't know much about Nefertiti. What I say in the book as well is that what we know about Nefertiti tells us more about ourselves than it does about her.
Truly charming. I think we should produce a separate episode about this mysterious and powerful couple, Nefertiti and Akhenaten. Another remarkable ancient Egyptian symbol is also a heavily lined eye, the Eye of Horus, which has become a popular and somewhat mysterious symbol transcending from the realm of myth and history into modern culture. So, what does this eye represent and what its distinctive eyeliner shape tell us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what I particularly love about the Eye of Horus is that it is a symbol of protection and it's like a symbol of royal power, of good health. The reason I believe that eyeliner is worn and interpreted in this context on the Eye of Horus is that eyeliner did, as I say, play a protective role. It did protect against the evil spirits as believed by the ancient Egyptians and by many today. And again, it protected against the glare of the sun and various eye ailments as well. The fact that it's sort of this eye that's highly stylized, it's not just the eye, it's also the brow, right? And that the makeup that is used to adorn the eye is eyeliner that has a protective property, I think lends to this idea that the Eye of Horus itself is a symbol of protection. So it is often worn on jewelry, for example. People believe it as sort of a form of protection, much like the evil eye. Sorry, the evil eye is also, it's worn to protect against the evil spirit, just to explain to your listeners as well. And the idea there, the belief is that it protects against sort of jealous glances or glances that have negative intent. The Eye of Horus resembles or closely resembles a falcon, and this reflects the falcon-headed god Horus, who was himself an important Egyptian deity in Egyptian mythology. To me, that sort of symbol of the protection that it offers is, I believe, closely tied to the way that the eye is adorned. And again, interesting that the falcon is part of that too, because if you look at the eye of the falcon, it has these very defined eyes too.
We can see that many of those beliefs are still living among the many communities across the world. It appears that they have transcended from the ancient times to the living cultures of today. Let's now cross the centuries and cultures and listen together to what Ibn Battuta observed in 14th century from the same charming land, Egypt.
Next came my journey from Cairo by the route of Said, with the object of crossing the noble Hijaz. I stayed on the night following my departure at the convent which Sahib Tajuddin ibn Hanna built Deir al-Tin. It is an enormous convent built by him for the sake of certain possessions of great pride and illustrious relics that he deposited in it, namely a fragment of the wooden basin of the Prophet, God's blessing and peace upon him, the pencil with which he used to apply Kohl to his eyes, the dirafsh, that is to say, the awl which he used for sewing his sandals, and the Quran of the commander of the faithful Ali bin Abi Talib, written in his own hand, God be pleased with him. Sahib, it is said, bought the illustrious relics of the Prophet, which we have mentioned, for 1,000 dirhams, and built the convent and endowed it with funds to supply food to all comers and goers and to maintain the guardians of these sacred relics. God Most High profit him by his blessed purpose.
In his travels, Ibn Battuta stayed overnight in a convent which was built by one of the Mamluks viziers outside Cairo in 14th century. For our dear audience, if you're interested to know more about Mamluk Sultanate, listen to our episode 4 and 5 with Professor Doris Abu Saif. This convent had been built specifically to house special objects of high devotional value, including a pencil which was used by Prophet Muhammad for applying kohl to his eyes. Regardless of the authenticity of this object, the story tells us that the application of kohl was quite likely a common practice by the Prophet Muhammad. But why and what do we know about this tradition, and how did this tradition inspire Muslim communities to adopt using this substance widely up until now?
Yeah, there are several sayings and hadith that support this idea that the Prophet Muhammad used to wear ithmid, which is a form of kohl, which would have been made from natural materials, likely antimony, and that this product was worn by the Prophet to treat his eyes medicinally and also for other purposes, which may have included strengthening the eyelashes, but mostly the idea behind it was to protect the eyes medicinally and to treat them medicinally. And then around that idea in the hadith, there's many sayings of the way that the eyeliner should be applied that would make it sunnah. So it would be applied a certain number of times to both eyes, for example. And that had to do with the idea of tawheed. And it was also applied in a way that did not attract attention. So you're not wearing it to attract attention physically. You're doing it in a very subtle way to treat the eyes, as I said, medicinally. And actually, there is one hadith that says in the afterlife that people in heaven will be given clothing that never wears out and also kohl for their eyes, which is really interesting that it features as an aesthetic feature in the afterlife. Muslim communities around the world subsequently have been wearing eyeliner not just as a form of protection for their eyes, but also to channel their religiosity because it's sunnah, because it's the way of the Prophet. Many of these communities wear it for multiple purposes, and one of them is religious, and one of them is for the same practical purposes the Prophet himself wore it with. And it's important also to note that there was a recent fatwa a few years ago out of the United Arab Emirates that said it is halal or permissible for people to wear kohl or eyeliner as long as they're doing it, again, very importantly, not with the intent to attract attention or to attract a member of the opposite sex. So I found it really interesting to see that it plays such an important role in Muslim communities that go really beyond or don't even touch on the idea of beauty at all. It is really to protect the eye and to channel that religiosity.
It's very interesting. So, the intention dictates the permissibility of co wearing, whether or not it elevates your beauty. You also mention ithmid, which is a name used for the type of kohl used in Hijaz region and by Prophet Muhammad. What were the qualities of this type of kohl, and how similar or different were the ingredients compared with the kohl applied by the ancient Egyptians?
The thing is, there's so many different sources that say different things. We know that it was made from natural minerals, and there's one called stibnite. It's a sulfide mineral that represents the main source of antimony. So, as I said, antimony would have been the source of ithmid, but antimony was also potentially used in ancient Egypt too. But in ancient Egypt, it would have been more likely to be from the minerals galena and malachite. So we do see some differences. But I think it's important to note that universally for centuries, the way kohl has been made has been the same. So it would be to take such minerals and to take other materials and either to ground them into a powder or to burn a material to create soot, and the soot would then be the pigment that is used on the eye. You may have had some overlap in how it was made and what it was made from, which is quite interesting because there are cultures around the world that still use similar materials today.
You mentioned an instance of fatwa for the application of code. Generally speaking, how the Islamic laws or Sharia outline the use of eyeliner for men and women. Did jurists typically consider it permitted or prohibited, and on which grounds?
The idea is that you are wearing it for practical or medicinal purposes rather than to attract attention to your physicality or to your aesthetics. Now, the interesting thing is there's a fine line there, and I use that pun intentionally, is that, when you do wear eyeliner, when you wear any form of it, really, even if it's subtle, it does elevate your attractiveness. So it's kind of hard to sort of see where one thing ends and the other thing begins. But I think that that's actually another interesting component of the use of eyeliner, because surely anyone who has used it at any point in history would know this. So that's an interesting element.
Knowing about this fine line, can you tell us on what special occasions usually Muslim communities are wearing kohl?
Yeah, great question. It really depends on the community, but it is often used for special occasions such as weddings. It's often used on Eid. It can be used on Fridays when men go to the mosque. In Petra, for example, some of the men that I spoke to tend to wear it to make sure that they wear it on Fridays as a form of sunnah. It's also applied to the eyes, often of newborns, as a way of, again, this idea of religiosity or protection. It depends really on the intent of the person, but often it's used in that regard as well. So it really does depend on which community. Obviously, we know the Islamic world is so vast, but those are some of the reasons.
In your book, you have spotlighted the origins and traditions surrounding kohl in Arab Bedouin communities close to Petra in Jordan, and you also touched upon them just now. What local ingredients are they reliant on to produce their kohl, and what special methods do they use to create quality eyeliner?
When I was there, I actually did on the ground reporting about this, and we found that the source of the coal was mostly from the sap of a tree or from a plant. So the tree is a juniper tree, and then a plant called farsetia, the farsetia plant, which is native to that region. Those materials would be retrieved by people who would go out with the intention of collecting them for the purpose of making coal. They would bring it home and they would then burn it under an aluminium pot, and then the ashes or the soot that is formed that accumulates at the top of the pot is then gathered, and it's a very dark black pigment, and obviously you need to have a liquid accompanying that pigment to allow you to deposit the eyeliner onto the eye, and you need an applicator as well. The liquids could be a number of things: rose water, it could be oil, it could be saliva, it could be a number of things, but essentially you need some sort of a liquid. The applicator would be dipped into the liquid and then into the powder and then deposited onto the eye. But this is the tradition that has been used not just in Jordan but across Bedouin and rural communities and the Levantine region in Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan. So that is really what they use. But of course, these natural materials can vary from region to region and place to place.
I'm just trying to imagine the process you detailed out. It's a very delicate process, and a lot of efforts go into that process. The final product then should be a very precious and expensive, right?
It is, yeah, it is. I mean, it's they're sold in pots, and a lot of the coal sellers actually make a decent income from it, especially because not everybody has the time to go out and gather those materials. And there's a general understanding that the natural material that is used for coal is beneficial for the eye in a way that processed eyeliner would never be. So that adds value to it. So therefore, it is considered a precious commodity. I know, for example, that coal from Yemen is considered to be very pure. So therefore, people would pay more for it. Similarly, coal from Saudi Arabia as well. So there is this idea of premium on this naturally produced substance, depending on what the material used is.
How people would distinguish premium and low quality coal? Is this any way to test that out?
Yeah, I've used so many different ones, honestly. I think the ones that are considered to be high quality are the ones that glide very easily onto the eye and don't cause any negative reactions, because that would indicate it's very pure from a purely natural material. And also ones that last longer. In some cases, some of the coal that I used, especially the ones coming from Jordan, from Petra, would last 3, 4 days. You would still have some form of the pigment on your lower water line, and you would sometimes have to remove that with olive oil or some sort of a makeup remover that can remove that kind of a stain. That would be considered higher quality because it's longer lasting.
So, there are some certain ways to verify the quality of the coal you're buying and wearing. How I've got another question on the roots of co-wearing in Arab Peninsula. Does the use of ethmid in Arab communities appear in any stories or folklore period to the influence of the Islamic era? I mean, before the emergence of Islam?
Yes, there are some texts from the Jahiliyyah period, as we know it, that indicated that Kohl was worn by both women and men, although ironically, and as I mentioned, there is a poem in the book that actually hints at the idea that Kohl is a very feminine product, and that if a man were to wear it, it would be sort of a sign of their weakness, which I thought to be quite interesting given in the Islamic era, it was worn by both men and women and completely actually advisable and accepted for men to wear it. This is a line from a poem. It says, it's by Afira bint Abad in the 3rd century CE. And it says, what's become of you that you let the king rape your brides? If you're not moved by this outrage, you might as well bathe in scent and kohl your eyes and wear the bridal dress. Again, this is like an indication of it's a very feminine thing. And then there's a line from an academic book, and in it it says, the women of the Mushrikeen pre-Islamic polytheists of Mecca at the Battle of Uhud in 3 AH would enter the battlefield carrying Kohl eyeliner. Every time a man would retreat or hesitate, one of the women would hand him an eyeliner saying, are you a woman? So this is really interesting because again, this is in the Jahiliyyah period. So it was viewed as being feminine.
Let's move eastward. In Iran, the kohl was locally named sorma and has been interlaced with the Persianate word in multiple ways. As you explore in your book, there were and still there are many different types of sorma, each with a distinct set of ingredients serving different purposes. So, can you give us some examples from this makeup menu?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what's really interesting about Iran, and by the way, there was a story that came out the other day that said that the earliest form of lipstick was found in southern Iran, which I thought to be amazing. Not a detail that I was able to include in my book, but the materials used in ancient Persia and through to this day for sorme would have included things like nuts. So really any nuts, hazelnuts, walnuts, pistachios would have been used to create in the same process it would have been made. But then there was also some really, really fascinating materials that were also used in the ancient Persian context. And among them were various varieties of precious stones that would have been crushed. So these would include pearls, emeralds, rubies, diamonds, gold, and silver. So these precious metals or precious stones would be crushed, and the powder of that would be used to form sorme. Was considered the most prestigious and sort of expensive of all the sorme types, and it was called the Kohl of 7 jewels. Also, different colors would have been used as well. There's ancient Persian texts that show that there was whites and pinks that were used, which I thought to be very interesting as well, because these kinds of colors are quite fashionable today.
Truly, it's like a very fancy cosmetic
Of
menu.
course, not affordable to everybody. Most people would have been able to afford the nuts, but not the kohl of the 7 jewel.
You just reminded me about an Iranian folklore. There is a renowned expression, the seven essentials, which identifies the elements for a women's makeup kit. What are these essentials, and is there any place for Soma to fit in?
Sorme was actually one of them, but it also included something like a blush that would be a reddish powder for the cheeks. There was also a whitish powder that was made, again, of natural minerals that was used as sort of a skin peel to sort of rid the bodies of impurities. And then there was the material from a flowering plant that would be used to dye the eyebrows or the hair. Could also be used to thicken the eyebrows. And one that everybody knows about is henna, which is still widely used today, drawn like a tattoo onto the skin. And then a goldish dust used to dye the hair, and then a beauty spot drawn on the face with sorme, actually. So yeah, this was like the 7 items of cosmetics or makeup accessories or tools that were used.
Really interesting. So, Soma was also used to draw a beauty spot on
Yes.
the face.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And we see that again in other cultures in South Asia and so on. So that's really interesting.
Further toward the east, we go to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, some of the largest manufacturers of kajal in the global cosmetic market. What are some of the cultural practices to do with the use of kajal that you would like to expand on and share with us?
Yeah, I actually traveled to India for this chapter of my book. I went to Kerala because I really wanted to, of course, capture how kajal is worn by women and men across the country, and especially women for adornment. Because as we know, like the idea of a beautiful Indian woman, it's the same for any Eastern woman, really, is closely associated with the idea of her eyes. And if you look at Bollywood, eyeliner is worn very prominently, and it has been since the inception of Bollywood. But really, kajal is also worn in very distinct ways in performance, in the performance arts in India, and the various forms of dancing, traditional dancing. And in Kathakali dance, Kathakali is sort of it's a form of storytelling through the eyes. So it means like the eye dance. The eyes are actually decorated and adorned very, very heavily and can often also indicate the type of character who the performer is. So some certain qualities of the character. Are they evil? Are they good? It depends really on how the eyeliner is worn in some cases. I spent some time with the Kathakali community in India, really immersed myself in the tradition of dance there. And also what I think is important in this context and what kind of makes it similar to even drag queens, for example, or other types of dance or performances around the world is that the eyeliner plays a big role in making the eye very distinctly visible from afar so that people in the audience can really be drawn to the eyes. And that's why it is drawn in such a very bold and vivid way. And also just this idea of the eye, right? In Indian culture, you have the third eye. The importance of the eye in general was so prominent there to me in the reporting that I did. It almost serves as like a portal to another world, to like the other worlds, like a portal into another universe. And the eyeliner kind of beckons you forth towards that world. So that was really, really for me, culturally very fascinating to observe and to write about.
Yeah, it's fascinating, especially how the multiple functions of the eyeliner have come together in the traditional dancing performance. Is it only used by women?
Well, actually, predominantly the Kathakali dancers have tended to be male, but more recently you see more and more women being integrated into this tradition, into this practice. So that was something that was also lovely to see because you have a lot of young people wanting to enter this practice.
Lovely. I'm now curious to know a bit more about your own eyeliner style. If I may ask you, have you ever made Kohl yourself? Do you have a preferred brand or a source? How often would you use traditional Kohl rather than commercially available eyeliner? And what is its significance for you in your personal use of Kohl?
I did when I was in Jordan. I went through the process with a Bedouin, wonderful Bedouin man there, Sleiman, who we gathered the materials together and then made the coal together. So that was a wonderful experience for me. In terms of my own style, I mean, I have always been very obsessed with the idea of lining my eyes as a form of honoring my culture and my heritage. So I have, worn coal, natural coal, for as long as I can remember, which I usually buy from Lebanon when I'm in Lebanon. But also, as you can see, I do wear liquid eyeliner on my upper lid. Yeah, so I like to kind of call it. It's like ancestral chic, it's like the modern and the traditional come together on my eyes. So I say I have a little bit of Nefertiti and a little bit of Amy Winehouse. I always get told that my eyeliner resembles Amy Winehouse, that I look like Amy Winehouse, which is an honor for me because I was a big fan of Amy Winehouse. But it's really the combination of the two things, which is quite fitting. I mean, I live in the West, but my mind and my heart and my thoughts are always in the East. So for me, it's like when I'm putting my eyeliner on, these two different worlds are coming together, but my mind and my heart are always in.
It's like a marriage of tradition and modernity on the stage of your eyes. And I can see from your face that it's a beautiful combination as well.
Thank you.
Zahra, it was a marvelous conversation. Thank you very much. We explored across many parts of the world and plenty of diverse cultures. Is there any final thing you would like to add?
Yeah, I think I really want people to take away from this book. The message of the book is that eyeliner is really not makeup. I mean, it's a form of makeup, of course, on the surface, but it's also a vehicle into so many fascinating cultures across the centuries. And that in learning about eyeliner and the history of eyeliner, you learn about the history of the people who have worn it and continue to wear it, the role it plays for them today. And that role is very layered. There are lots of moving stories and there's lots of joyful stories as well. And that says a lot about the history of eyeliner, is that throughout so many historical changes over the centuries, people still wear this item in the same way that they wore it centuries ago. And that to me makes it very unique.
Nice. Thank you, Zahra, for being our guest. All the passages from Ibn Battuta Observations have been selected from the English translation, The Travels of Ibn Battuta, translated from Arabic to English by Hamilton Gibb and Charles Beckingham, published for the Huckload Society in 5 volumes. Our editor and creative consultant is Kate O'Connell. Aydogan Kars and Ashkan Bahrani are our content advisors from Monash University. Frank Joachim reads the passages from The Travels of Ibn Battuta. The music was composed by Ali Gogin and Tia Goodwin, cover art designer. You can follow Oriental Journeys on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. You can also check out our website www.theorientaljourneys.com, which contains key information and codes on each episode.